do not need perfection to
Right.
get results.
Doing every little bit helps, right? It's like, it's not about perfection, it's just about consistency. This week, I interviewed Gabriella Rosa. She's a fertility specialist and reproductive health educator. She created the world's first virtual and holistic fertility clinic, and we discuss factors that affect men and women when it comes to fertility, how resilient the body is when it comes to health, Dr. Rosa's daily health habits, and her one tip to become the healthiest version of yourself. Really enjoyed my interview with Dr. Rosa. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Gryn, and today I have Gabriella Rosa on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Could be the first fertility specialist I have coming on the show, so
I think that's amazing.
you should feel
There'll be
honored.
lots. I am indeed. I am indeed.
And you're living in Boston, originally from Australia, correct?
That's right. That's right. Although, of course, nobody's from anywhere really. So it's like, it's one of those things that it always perplexes me when people ask me, where are you from originally? And I'm like, hang on a second, should I be telling my birth story right about this moment?
Right.
Because my parents are Brazilian. I was born in Brazil.
Oh,
And they immigrated to Australia. I've been living there most of my life. But then, of course, the last 3 years have brought me to Boston to finish my doctorate. So it has been a journey.
yeah. I've always wanted to go to Australia, just haven't. My wife and I will definitely get there sooner rather than later.
You're gonna love it. Let me put it that way. And
Mm,
especially because we have no winters, really.
mm,
Like
yeah.
it's just a beautiful place. It's lovely.
Yeah. Well, we have winters in Chicago, I can tell you
No, no.
that. Yeah, I'm sure you're dealing with that in Boston
In
too.
Boston, exactly. So it's just like I know winters. You know what's funny is that before I moved to Australia, I used to think that, like 15 degrees Celsius, whatever that. I still haven't learned Fahrenheit despite my 3 years here. But, most people will probably be able to do the conversion in their head. I'm not one of those people. So,
Yeah.
but I used to think that, like 15 degrees Celsius was cold until I
Hmm.
moved here and I realized that minus 25
Mm.
Celsius is cold.
Yes,
So,
yes. Right.
and so that was my big learning experience in living in a place where there are defined seasons and there is a
Yes.
real winter.
I will say I don't mind the seasons. It does make you appreciate the weather we're getting right now, when it's
For
70s.
sure.
Yeah. Um,
Yes, absolutely. I had that experience yesterday, so it was lovely. It's just like, yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. This is the time to be in the Midwest for sure.
That's it. Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. And, when it comes to fertility, even though we don't want those extreme heat situations,
mm,
it's probably a good thing that people can actually take their clothes off. So there is that kind of like best of both worlds type situation that we need to aim for.
Although actually on fertility, I am curious, does like sunlight and like vitamin D synthesis, like does that affect fertility? Or
Absolutely.
okay.
I think that, one of the really interesting things about vitamin D is that it pretty much affects everything, right? I think that the latest research on vitamin D tells us that it's essential for hormonal synthesis throughout the body, for nutritional balance throughout the body. There's just so many different things that vitamin D does that's going to be important. And that includes ensuring that the DNA of the egg and sperm are also good quality and that there is a whole kind of egg and sperm quality
Mm,
aspect to, and mind you, it's not just vitamin D. There are many different nutrients that are going to have that similar impact. And so nutritional repletion, making sure that we are repleting nutrients and therefore are able to draw on our body's banking, of nutrients throughout the reproductive life is going to be very important for overall fertility outcomes. And of course, as we also know, there are many nutritional deficiencies that are linked to things like like spinal bifida and neurotube defects and all sorts of different types of health conditions that will be passed on to an embryo if the prospective parents, aren't as healthy as possible and as nutritionally replete as they can be. So it makes a huge difference.
yeah. And I'm assuming there's also a genetic component as well, right?
Look, there are many factors. When it comes to fertility, I think that it's wise to consider fertility as a holistic conversation from the perspective that first and foremost, it is not only about the egg and the female. I think that societally, there's a lot of expectation that is placed on women and women's age and women's egg quality.
Hmm.
But what is often left out of the conversation, and this happens in and out of the doctor's office, when a woman goes in, and even if a couple goes in, what most couples will experience and most men can attribute, can kind of, tell, is that they will literally be like just sitting there. Like they were part of the decoration, you
Hmm.
know,
Right.
and women are going to be told, you need to do this and this and this, and these are the tests that you need to go and do, and these are the reasons as to why you're not getting pregnant. And I'll see you, at the beginning of the next cycle for whatever next
Hmm.
step that you're going to take. And usually that conversation ends like that within a 5-minute period. And so most couples are left with that impression that, well, there's only one thing that we need to look at, which is what's happening with the female's body and their hormones and whatever else is going on for them.
Right.
And the men is kind of like an afterthought.
Hmm.
But the reality of fertility is that it's a 50-50 equation. You have 50% of the DNA that's going to come from, the
Yeah.
female and 50% from the male. It's not a solo act,
Right.
right? And so we really do need to take into account the fact that the sperm is going to be contributing 50% of whatever outcome you're going to have. And outcomes can be anything from a baby, which is the ideal outcome that couples are hoping for when they're trying to get pregnant, to inability to conceive, inability to keep a pregnancy to term, failed IVF treatments, whatever the outcome we are experiencing, it's going to be, as I always say, fertility is a team sport. So it's going to be a team play, whether it is a good outcome or an outcome that needs to be improved. So that's the first place that I think is really important for people to start on a conceptual level and really think about is that if something isn't going to plan, and mind you, in the general population, the average number of months that a couple is trying before they get pregnant is 3 months.
Mm.
So the fact that infertility is diagnosed at 12 months of trying to get pregnant without success
Hmm.
basically is kind of giving a bit of leeway to the entire situation. So it's kind of like it's epidemiology's way of kind of going, well, they probably haven't tried it, really that properly for the first couple of months. They were just kind of doing, random conception attempts and, or they didn't try one particular month or a couple of months went on without proper conception attempts being taken, into consideration. And so it's kind of like by the time you get to 12 months, you really do have a problem. Right. And sometimes you don't even want to get to 12 months to then go ask the question, is there something else I need to do? I
Mm.
spoke to a couple yesterday. The lady was 34, the man was 36, and they had been trying for 9 months. And in fact, in the reporting in the questionnaire, they had said 7 months. I don't usually see people at that kind of like, 7 month stage. Like typically the people who come to me are people who have been, and we've done a study through Harvard, through my master's in public health there. And basically we saw that for essentially 4 years was the average time to pregnancy for the couples who were or the average time of infertility for the couples that were coming to see me. So you can imagine, I'm seeing people from like 2 years of trying to get pregnant all the way up until 19 years
That's a
of
long time.
infertility.
That's a long
A
time.
long time, a long time.
Yeah.
And so basically, when somebody comes to me at 7 months, I'm like, wow, these are just utterly incredibly proactive people, or there is a problem, right? And in this case, the guy, it was really an interesting conversation because it was that typical interaction that I will have with a couple when they don't think that there is an issue, but they're kind of questioning, should I do something more? And so, as it turns out, long story short, and I even the conversation went such that the guy was like, "Yeah, I don't really think we need to be here." And she's like, no, but I think there's something wrong. And so I open the file and I look at the case and I look at the hormonal levels and I'm like thinking, okay, this woman is perimenopausal already.
Mm,
Like she's got a normal AMH, which is a normal ovarian reserve. But her FSH on day 3 of the cycle was already over 18, which it should be under 10.
mm,
And when you start to see that kind of deviation from what's optimal, what's ideal, that is the level at which IVF already starts to fail at a much higher rate. So an FSH level at above, which is follicle stimulating hormone, at a rate or at a number over 15 already tells us that the chance of IVF working is diminished in that particular person.
mm.
And so, and I wasn't expecting that as well, because I was just kind of like, okay, they've just been trying for, 34, just trying for 7 months. He's probably right. They probably just need to go and try a bit longer. As I open the file, I'm like, okay, let me explain what's
Mm.
happening here, And so that's the kind of situation that sometimes happens when people are trying because they think, I don't have to do anything until I've hit the 12-month mark. But sometimes it's actually wise to begin that process of exploration of asking the questions of, okay, what do I need to know? How is it that this is playing out? And if it hasn't happened in 3 months, which is the average time in population levels, then should I be asking more questions? The answer is always yes. Okay,
Mm.
so if you've passed 20, the answer is yes. You should be asking more questions
Mm.
because fertility for females is finite. And I think that that's one of the reasons as to why men are so kind of put on a second like plane when it comes to fertility, because even though male fertility declines over time and men do have a decrease fertility potential as they age, that happens much more slowly than it does for a female. You will still have Hugh Hefner be able to actually get a Playboy bunny pregnant at the age of 20 when he's 90. But the
Mhm.
reason that that happens is because the egg quality in that female
Right.
is at its optimal potential, right? It's not because the sperm is great. But you see, sometimes, and this is one of the really interesting things, and again, I think one of the reasons as to why females are more the target of the conversation of if this is not happening, it's to do with your egg, is because it's the egg's responsibility to fix the DNA fragmentation within the sperm. And it can do that really well when it's at its maximum fertility potential,
Mm.
i.e., pre 25.
Right.
Right. But when we start to kind of get over that 25, 30, 35, where then that fertility, but and it's not so much the reason that people say that fertility declines heavily by age 35 isn't so much because all of a sudden ovarian reserve plummets to a huge extent. It does decline, and there are some kind of milestone declines that happen throughout time. But the biggest reason is that the mitochondria, which is that energy production cell within the cytoplasm, starts to decrease in its ability to correct the DNA fragmentation within the sperm. And that starts to happen much more severely than the years prior. So it becomes a situation that before the egg was able to actually fix a lot of those errors with somewhat ease. After a certain stage and age for a female, that work becomes more tiresome for the egg. And
Mm.
so what happens is that even though there might be fertilization and we might start to have, kind of those cells develop and create an embryo, the embryonic development that is ongoing that requires and relies so heavily on that mitochondrial function starts to actually flag in terms of its ability. And that's one of the reasons as to why it declines. So if we don't have superhero sperm, at that stage, we end
Mm.
up with more problems and more kind of, challenges than ideally we would like to. So there's a whole lot of these concepts that a lot of times we take for granted. We think that, it's a specific age and stage and it's just to do with one person, but fertility really is multifactorial in so many ways.
Yeah, and you have virtual and holistic fertility clinic, and so are you dealing with individuals who are going through IVF or are thinking about it, and what sort of got you interested in that area?
I do. We treat couples in every continent other than Antarctica, and that happened because when I had my first son, I was like, okay, I need to, kind of like find a way of still being able to see patients and do the work that I do without doing 60 patient hours a week. And
Mm,
so I had to completely change the way that and reimagine the way that I was actually working and what value we were delivering. And even though we were doing a lot of fertility work already, I've been doing this work since I was, gosh, I don't know, since 2001.
mm,
So it's been a long time. But I decided that okay, I really want to deliver outcomes, like I really want to deliver a kind of one-stop shop for people who have been trying for a long time. And there was a point where I decided, okay, I'm not going to treat anybody who hasn't been trying for less than 2 years. And people who typically have gone through multiple failed IVF cycles or years of infertility or recurrent miscarriages. And I did that for about a 15-year period. And then we did our study, and I realized that, okay, this program actually is highly effective for people who have had previously failed IVF treatments, for people who have been trying for a long time and have experienced recurrent miscarriage, and also for those who, one time, and we've had many couples in this situation, but one of the people who really kind of highlighted to me that, okay, if we address these underlying metabolic factors and biochemical factors that are getting in the way, it's not only possible for somebody who has had 20 failed IVF cycles to conceive and take home a healthy baby, but actually to conceive naturally. And so that was the first time that I had a realization because of the treatment process that I was taking someone on that enabled that outcome for me to see that, okay, this is really effective in all of those very difficult, complex cases. And out of those experiences with patients, the reason that I ended up going to 2 years of trying to conceive beforehand, before coming to me, is because I had two patients back to back. One had been trying for 10 years, the other for 19 years, both conceived naturally. So I realized that there was a difference in the way that people who almost felt like they had tried everything and nothing had worked actually approached the way in which I best worked, which is, my philosophy is that you the real shortcut comes from doing all of the work. That's what it comes down to. When you have a situation that is difficult and complex, like the types of patients that I see, there is no shortcut. The shortcut is literally going back to the drawing board and asking every single question from scratch and figuring out what is getting in the way and what do we need to address here. And so those were the places where, and then I had a lady who had had 11 miscarriages, and so
mm,
I remember like where the almost kind of like these big milestones in the way that I started to communicate the value that I delivered to patients happened because of patients that came into my clinic that I was able to help. And then, of course, you do that for 10 years and then you're able to have enough data to analyze. And I entered my master's in public health at Harvard. And that was when I went, okay, you know what? It's time that we analyze our results and we see what kinds of patients we support, how we help them, and what are the benefits and the outcomes that we're achieving. And that's then how we found that the program had a 78.8% live birth rate. 47.7% of patients were conceiving naturally and the remainder through IVF. And even though most people had been told that they needed donor egg, only 5.6% of those patients, which is a cohort of 544 patients, actually needed donor egg. So it was a kind of an eye opener for me as well,
mm,
because at the time, and particularly as a clinician, it's easy to if you're not working in an academic center, which is obviously very different, and kind of like how we're restructuring the clinic and how we're actually putting the resources into the institute to be able to actually do more research in terms of what it is that we deliver. But if you're just kind of working on your own as a clinician day to day, you're not necessarily having the tools, the knowledge, the skill, and the ability to really integrate that kind of level of research and understanding about what it is that you're doing and how that's actually translating into results, which has been the differentiator for us. And it's been just such a wonderful thing to be able to see, what kinds of patients we really do our best work for. It's kind of like that end of line. And the reason that it became that, Brian, it's interesting because I started my career with this absolute naive desire that I was going to help couples who just wanted to have the healthiest possible baby. And I
Hmm.
really wanted to help those people, like I wanted this to be the first thing that people actually did before they went and escalated their treatment into much more invasive types of treatments. As it turned out, and I'm sure that you would have never heard of this in your own practice, but as it turned out, people that didn't have a lot of pain, didn't have a lot of kind of drive to
Hmm.
do so much work,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
And so it turned out that the people who I really wanted to help were the people who were like, we don't need this. And so it was when people who had gone through all things that hadn't worked and say to me, in fact, it was this person who had been going through infertility for 10 years who turned around to me and said, listen, I'm going to give up. So you better help me just to be healthier anyway. And I was like, oh, okay, since you put it that way, let's do this and see what happens. But so that's how it all kind of started, I
Hmm.
guess, and it's been a massive journey since then. But I have to say that it's been very rewarding. I look at our baby gallery and I go, wow, all of these babies would not have been here if it wasn't for what we do, and it's very gratifying.
Are there certain lifestyle factors that you can point to that have helped individuals get through this sort of journey?
That's a great question. And look, yes, the answer is yes. The way that we need to think about exposures and day-to-day actions is, are they adding value? Are they having a positive effect or are they having a negative effect? When it comes to fertility, there is no such thing as a neutral effect. So if we're looking at improving energy, okay, there might be things that you do that you enjoy that don't have a positive effect and also have a tendency to have a bit of a neutral effect, but it doesn't, in the grand scheme of detraction from outcome, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Like you can maintain those habits and it's going to be okay. When it comes to fertility, when things have not been straightforward, it's almost like you have to eliminate the thought of a neutral effect. All effects are either going to be positive or negative. There's no other way. So it's almost like, for example, let me try and give you an example of this in something for general health that might not. Okay, let's say that somebody decides that three alcoholic drinks in a week has a neutral effect on their health. Contentious, right? There's questions around that if we go back to the science, but let's just say that for general health, long-term lifestyle choices, three alcoholic beverages, standard drinks are quote unquote in the general population acceptable as a neutral effect. It's not positive, it's not going to enhance your health, but it's possibly, and I say that in brackets and, with because it really depends on the person, depends on their health, depends on so many different factors, but possibly it's not going to have a necessarily negative effect. It could have a neutral effect on that general person in the general population with general health, needs.
Hey everyone, quick interruption here. If you are looking to gain energy, lose inches around your waist, and build strength, well, look no further than my book, The Step Ladder System: 6 Steps to Lifelong Health and Vitality. What you get with the book is my full step-by-step plan and blueprint that I've worked with all my clients with, packed into one book. With part one, you're going to lay the foundation, tackle any common challenges that might come in your way. Part two is my 6-pillar blueprint, how to set yourself up with a solid plan and know exactly what to do when life throws any curveballs. And lastly, step three are learning to implementation, a plan for getting results over the next weeks and beyond. So there you have it. I'll leave a link in the show notes for my stepladder system book. Now back to the podcast.
When it comes to fertility and you have been trying to get pregnant and you haven't been successful, and there have been potentially failed treatments or even just a long-standing time to pregnancy, three alcoholic drinks is going to have a negative effect. Right. So then it becomes one of those situations. It's like, okay, I need to make some choices about what it is that I want and how do I want my life to be? And what is it that I want to be able to say to myself when I'm 90, sitting on my porch in my rocking chair? Am I saying to myself, I've given it my absolute everything, I've done my very best, and for whatever reason, whatever hasn't happened, and it wasn't because of something that I did or did not do. And this is not at all to make people feel, guilty about choices and lifestyle choices. Not at all. It's really that I believe in absolute agency when it comes to you being able to tell the story to yourself about how your fertility journey evolved, right? And I think that there is a lot to be said for the healing that people need throughout that, kind of reproductive lifespan to be, if it had, especially if it hasn't happened, that they actually need to be able to have that closure of knowing that, okay, the things that I did were the best things for me under my circumstances in the way that I could actually put them in place and the constraints that I had. And I think that that gives a lot of people peace of mind. So going back to the original question, which is, are there things that you can do and are there things that impact more than others? The way that I like to explain this to people is like this. Let's just say, and you need to indulge me on this one for a moment. Let's imagine that it was possible for you to gestate a baby. Okay. So everybody, woman, man, whatever, can deliver their own babies, gestate their own babies. Now, let's say if you were actually gestating a child right now, if you had your own little baby inside of you growing and, kind of developing, what are all of the things that you know that you would absolutely start doing or you would absolutely stop doing if you were to give your baby the healthiest possible start in life, the best possible start in life? Like, if I put it to you this way, you'll come up with a list, right? You will know. And in
Right.
fact, I think most people will know, okay, these are the things that I need to start doing right now that are going to help me to have a healthy baby. These are the things that I need to stop doing right now to help me do that. Those are the things that we need to start and stop doing several months prior to actually getting to the conception attempt stage. Reason being, it takes approximately 4 months for the sperm to actually form and for the egg to mature in its second stage. There's two stages of egg maturation. Full egg maturation cycle is approximately 10 to 12 months.
Mm.
So anything that you are doing and starting today, you're not going to see the benefit of those results until about 10 or 12 months down the track. And most people stop and start things and they do that for a month and they go, I've done it and it hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, let's explain that cycle so that you understand that it's not going to be as quickly and as easily as I'm going to do this for a couple of months, 3, 4, 6, and think that, okay, I've tried it, I've done it, and it hasn't worked. No, you actually, and this is how I actually support my patients in understanding this concept, is that you need to start and you need to continue
Mm.
until you tell yourself that you're done completely with the idea of having babies or you're holding a baby.
Mm.
It's not going to be a situation of you start and you stop anytime before either one of those two outcomes arrives, because whichever one comes first, you start and you stop until, right? So, and these are the types of things that people need to think about. So in conceptual terms, all of the things that you would do to be as healthy as possible, i.e., gestating your baby so that your baby can be as healthy as possible, are the things you want to implement. And that will include healthy nutrition, filtered water, like good sleep, good movement, like all of the things that we know are going to be vital. And the things that are toxic for our cells, for our body, which is the reverse of all of that, and even additional toxins that will negatively impact the way that our cells work overall, are going to negatively impact our sex cells. It's going to negatively impact sperm parameters, it's going to negatively impact egg quality.
Mm.
So this is how people need to think about it. Every single thing you do in your day to day, make no mistake about it, is an exposure.
Yeah.
The number one exposure that we have multiple times a day is food. So that's one place that people can actually already make such a difference, to what's going on for them. So those are just some of the things that if people start to conceptualize it and think it in those terms, then they can start making really viable and excellent decisions, for their day to day and the choices that they make in their day to day to optimize their health and their fertility.
And I would imagine someone that, or a couple, or an individual that's trying to conceive, this could be a good, we talk about like creating a why, or creating clarity around like what your goals are, like why you want to become healthy. And obviously, this could be a kick in the butt to people who aren't didn't previously have good habits. Now they're like, oh, well, I'm trying to conceive. I need to like get my shit together.
And
Right.
it is that. And I think it's even more because one of the really interesting things about fertility, and science tells us now that fertility and whether our future generations are going to be as fertile as they can be actually is transgenerational, which means that your impact and the things that you do today is not just going to impact you and your next child. It's going to impact you, your next child, your child after, like your grandchildren
Yeah.
and your great grandchildren. And we know that because, I mean, even if we can't quite conceptualize how that is, let me put it to you this way. You were in your grandmother's womb. So, whilst your grandmother was gestating your mother had all of the eggs that she was going to be born with and that she was ever going to have in her lifetime,
Mm.
which meant that your exposures from your great grandmother and even from your great grandmother were already in effect by the time you were born.
Mm.
So, when people think, oh, this doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what it is that I do, think again, because it
Mhm.
matters a lot. And it matters not just to you, and it matters to every generation that is going to come after you. So, again, it's not to make people go on some kind of guilt trip, it's actually to make people conscious of their impact,
Mm.
of their legacy, and what it is that they're actually bringing into the world.
What's I like to ask this question to most of my guests. What's like one thing you've changed your mind on when it comes
Oh my
to
God, so many things, so
like,
many things. Um, in terms of fertility, in terms of how I work, in terms of like
mm,
life.
that's I don't know, right? Very broad question. Yeah, maybe we'll stick on the fertility topic. Like, what's one thing you've changed your mind on regarding fertility?
Over the years,
Yeah.
let me see. This is one thing. This is actually a really big thing that I changed my mind on. I used to be as a young practitioner, I used to be very black and white, very gun ho, in terms of my recommendations. It's like you have to do all of the things,
Mhm.
otherwise you're not going to get your results. And what I realized is that actually that's not true. And let me conceptualize this for you. Let's say that optimum fertility is kind of like if I'm standing and I'm pointing to above my head, right? So let's say that optimal fertility is all the way up there, like a couple of hands above my head. And
Mhm.
let's say that your level, your current state is somewhere around my neck. Okay, so you're kind of starting from that place. Now, let's say that we actually put in some work and some effort, and we get your fertility potential level to kind of rise up until, like, say, midline around my nose. Now, if that's the case, for some people, just from where you are to
Mhm.
raising to that kind of mid level around my nose, it may be sufficient to get the result that you want, which is a healthy baby. You don't have to go all the way up to optimum fertility to get that result.
Mhm.
Now, if raising to above midline is not getting your result, that means that we need to do more. And so I've actually learned over the years that where someone starts and kind of where they are to where they need to be to get a baby is not always optimal. And, let me put it to you this way. I've had patients over the years who like they came into, the clinic to first see me. And they were the type that ate McDonald's for 7 days a week, and they smoked and they drank alcohol and they did drugs and, all of these things.
Right.
Now, sometimes people in that kind of situation are willing to go cold turkey and go, that's it, let's completely do a 180 and change it entirely. And that's great, but it is absolutely 0.1% of the population.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure that you wouldn't disagree with this. It's very hard to get people to actually completely shift their habits in that way in a short period of time. And that's what we need for fertility. Like we don't have all day,
Mhm.
literally. So we need to do things very quickly. And so I've realized that if somebody is starting at that level, we don't even need to go to optimal and
Right.
optimum habits to get their bodies to already have the removal of major obstacles that enables it to be healthier and actually deliver a better outcome. Sure, the better your habits, the better the input into the system, the better your output is going to be, the better the outcome, how quickly it happens, how healthy the baby is, all of those things will make a difference the more that we shift and the more that we improve the way that we're doing things. But you don't have to, you do not need perfection to
Right.
get results. And I think that that's something that over the years it has, clinical practice has really demonstrated that, and our results prove it. So, that's something that I have definitely changed my mind on
Mhm.
over the years.
Yeah. And that makes sense for anyone in general, right? When it comes to just getting, optimizing their health and, doing every little bit helps, right? It's like, it's not about perfection, it's just about consistency.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing about it too is looking at that never ending and constant, never ending improvement, right?
Right.
Because you are consistent, and then if you're incrementally, minimally improving over time, it's like compound interest, right? At some
Sure.
point, you're going to be looking back and going, wow, look at where I've come, look at how much I have achieved. And I think that there is so much wonderful beauty in that, is the fact that as humans, we can make choices at any point and make decisions on how we want to change and how we want to be different and actually create a complete set, a new life, a new physical body, a new
Yeah.
everything,
I'm
just
sure.
by making those tiny
And I was
improvements.
going to say, I'm sure you've seen this, like the human body is so resilient. Like you can have these habits for so long and then make changes and see, people want instant results, but they can see gradual changes, within days, weeks, and then months, obviously, as well. So the body is very adaptable.
I mean, look, all you have to do, and I see this in my clinic daily, when you have a lady or a person who has been trying for 19 years to get pregnant, and after 5 months of doing the work really diligently,
Hmm.
is actually pregnant for the first time in her life, that's proof, and
Right.
then goes on to delivering a baby, that, okay, yeah, this is not just conjuncture. This is actually what happens with the body. I like to say that when you remove the obstacles to optimum health, it's amazing what the body just naturally and perfectly knows what to do.
Mm.
All you
Yeah.
have to do is remove those obstacles and support it with just some basic things, and it will make a huge difference to how the body operates. Now, with long-standing infertility and difficult complex cases, there are many more layers to that because usually we have other pathologies going on and we have some underlying biochemistry that's not quite right. So we might need to address silent infections and, like SNPs and all sorts of different kinds of really deep biochemical root causes. But overall, in the aggregate, oh my God, it's amazing. Like the body is just so incredible
Mm.
in what it can achieve in such a short period of time, irrespective to all of the previous pounding that went on, decades before. So I think that that's really a wonderful thing about how the body just, knows what to do.
Have you seen it in like your own habits, like having a practice like this and just talking to people about, doing certain things? Like I know for me, like having a podcast and then coaching clients, it's like, when you're talking to others, it sort of ingrains it in yourself a little bit. Like, have you found that your habits have changed? And if so, like, what have you changed?
Absolutely. My habits have changed entirely from, and the thing is, I've been doing this work so long, and I truly believe in leading by example,
Sure.
right? So, from my perspective, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome at the age of 18. And so that's a metabolic hormonal health condition, number one cause of infertility in women. So, being overweight, having insulin resistance, and, kind of having to address all of those different aspects has been a constant in my life, over time. And it was through my own program that I was able to conceive, have my children. And then after I finished, I was probably at the worst. After I finished having babies, I was at the worst point of my, like, body.
Yeah.
Because, it takes a lot to be pregnant, to breastfeed. I breastfed both my children each for 2 years. So all of that, like that was an entire period of life. Gosh, from the age of 32 to the age of 37, I was either pregnant or breastfeeding,
Right,
and
right.
so it's a huge toll on a woman's body. And that's because I only had two children. There are women who keep going and have, so many more children. But I had two, and that, at the end of that kind of like by the time I hit 38, my son was two, I was weaning him off, breastfeeding. And I literally had a picture taken of me that made me go, that cannot be what I look like. Like that just cannot be what I look like. And it
Mm.
was one of those. I was with my son holding his hand, going to the pool, and it was one of those half side back pictures. I was like, no, no. So in that moment, upon seeing that picture, I was like, okay, this is it, bodybuilding. I am getting into bodybuilding. And so I did. I got into full on like athlete coach, body level bodybuilding, full on for like 7 years and
Mm.
completely transformed my physique and how I looked and all the things that I was doing. And, that for me was a wonderful period of, again, also being able to see personally in my own body and how my body was behaving, um, a complete shift. So, which again further informed my absolute conviction for what one, the body's capable of, and two, what it is that my patients can achieve. Because, now there is research that shows that resistance training, the combination of zone two training really optimizes mitochondrial function and biogenesis and, all sorts of things, which obviously improve and optimize fertility. So I have a program called the Fertility Challenge. It's a free program that's open to patients all over the world. And people can come in and it's a 30-day kind of heavy education on what are all of the things that you can do
Mm.
to optimize your fertility. And in there, I go through and really describe and explain the science around what kind of training, the way that you do it, all of those things, because it makes such a huge difference. And I've seen it make such a huge difference, not only in my life, but in my patients' lives. But if I was the type of person who was a couch potato and telling people that they needed to do this, what credibility would I have
Yeah.
to say, no, 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 here, darling, this is what we're doing, right? I wouldn't have any credibility to do that. So I almost feel like as a clinician, you have to have the lived experience and the credibility to be able to actually hold your patients accountable to the way in which it's actually going to give them the results that they are looking for. So it's a big part of my life, living by example.
Yeah. So true. And if you were gonna, we'll finish up with this, but if you were gonna give one tip to an individual, uh, maybe looking to perceive, conceive or not, what one tip and they were getting started would you give them?
I would say act pregnant now to get pregnant later, whether they're trying to get pregnant or not. Because if they're doing that, they are going to be healthier. They are going to have more energy. They're going to have a better outlook on life. They're going to have a better life overall. So whether you are actually preparing to have a baby, doing all the things that are going to help you have the healthiest possible baby, and removing the things that aren't is going to serve you. And even if you are not, and you want to be the healthiest version of yourself, well, that's a place to start.
Love that. Love that. Well, this was great. Where's the best place for people to find you?
People can go to my website, which is fertilitybreakthrough.com, or they can Google me, Gabriella Rosa, and it's GABRIELA ROSA, Gabriella Rosa. They will see me everywhere. So fertilitybreakthrough.com is the usual hub.
Nice. And you have that 30-day challenge on there? Is that on there? Yeah.
Absolutely. So people can go and register for the free 30-day challenge through the website and join us. We have one starting every month, and it's a wonderful, wonderful community and support. And for me, what I think is so amazing about it is the fact that people don't have to try and piece all of the information together.
Mm,
We've done it for them,
that's nice.
and we do take them a very kind of driven, narrow path toward understanding the things that they can do to really optimize their chances, no matter how they're trying to get pregnant. So that's a really great thing.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Gabrielle. Oh, one
The
more thing.
other thing, the one more thing that I will say that people might like to actually have access to is Fertility Breakthrough, the book. It's free on Spotify and YouTube. So
Mm,
it's a book that, really kind of depicts the philosophy of how we work, but also again gives more information about diet, lifestyle, things that people can do. So that's available free on Spotify and YouTube as well. Fertility Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage when other treatments have failed is the name of
mm,
the book.
okay. And you have a podcast, right?
Oh, I do, but the podcast has been out of season for a little
Oh,
bit.
okay.
Since I've been doing my doctorate, it
Yeah.
has been,
On the
on the
back
back
burner.
burner.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, great meeting you, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing all the knowledge with us.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here.
Thanks for listening to the show. I know there's thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to listen to mine. I will put a link in the show notes if you want to connect with my guest. And if you are looking for one-on-one consulting with me, I will put a free 15-minute link so you can set up a call to see if you're fit for my 6-month health breakthrough program. So thanks again. Feel free to rate and subscribe. I would love that to help support the podcast. And till next time, have a great rest of the day, and I will see you on my next podcast. Thanks so much.